Insightful teaching with Jacob Prasch on Moriel TV, where God is my teacher.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. Here's my friend and my brother, Jacob Prasch. How are you, brother?
Blessings in Jesus. If he wasn't coming, I'd be depressed, but he is coming, so I am elated.
Amen. Well, Jacob, thank you for tuning in with us and staying up with us. I know it's a little late in the UK, but this is important. This is important. I know you make the time to help us understand the time in which we live in, and we also love to catch up with you. You also have some Bible studies coming up, Jacob. You want to tell them about tomorrow?
Tomorrow we have, which is Saturday the 13th, is it?
Yep.
Tomorrow, Saturday the 13th at 11 p.m. UK time or Greenwich Mean Time, but it will be 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 o'clock Central Time, 4 o'clock Rocky Mountain Time, and 3 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, and 1 o'clock in Hawaii. It'll also be 7 a.m. in Singapore and Western Australia, 10 a.m. in Eastern Australia, and then, of course, noontime in New Zealand. We will be looking at the Rebellion of Sheba. The Rebellion of Sheba on RTN. It'll be live streamed also on Moriel TV. Keep us in prayer. We've had a few technical issues. We want this to work smoothly. The Rebellion of Sheba will be tomorrow, UK time.
That's great, Jacob. We appreciate you, and I think people have been really eager to get involved in the Bible studies. You can get it through Zoom. You can also go on YouTube, go on RTN, and figure out which platform you like the best to tune in. But all of it, we get to see you, and we actually, if you're on Zoom, you get to on Wednesdays we get to interact with you. On Saturdays, you're basically just preaching. So tune in on Wednesdays too. You're going through the book of Colossians. That's been an interesting study.
Colossians, and we'll continue with Colossians on Wednesday, Lord willing. Colossians chapter 2.
Colossians chapter 2. Amen. Jacob, let's get down to some brass tacks here. We got some big stuff happening here.
Right.
And, but Jacob, speaking of like Rome, like the EU, big global powers, in this particular case is the World Economic Forum. They just released their weekly strategic intelligence. This is something that they come out weekly, and for the most part, it doesn't change. It's kind of the same story. But they have announced their plans, and it includes 5 things in which they're going to base their plan going forward, I should say. Their plan going forward will be based on these 5 things. They say one of them is the vaccine and the passport, requiring a vaccine and passport to basically behavioral change and less discrimination. That's one of their things. The other one is climate change. We won't have a world in 10 years, so we need to really stop this disaster. So the only way to do it is by giving world leaders, government leaders, oversight of policy and regulations of the world's industries. That's one of their things that they want to do. Carbon revenue. And of course, there's something else that didn't really matter too much, but there was one more that was really interesting was happiness, anger, and anxiety. How to negotiate from anger to get what you want. Now, I don't know if you want to tackle any of those or if none of those.
Let's take those 4 in a row.
Yeah.
What was the first one you said?
Vaccinations and passports.
Okay. The exploitation of COVID for purposes of politically motivated population control. That's what it really means. What's the second?
One thing about the digital pass, Jacob, I'm not sure if you know, IBM and Moderna have now hooked up to really become the new trust and transparency companies to bring us about tracking digital health and pass.
That's right. Population control.
Yeah.
But of course, the mayor of Chicago will still get her hair done, and the governor of Illinois' wife will still fly to Florida. Just like the Soviet Union. There's one standard for the elites and one standard for everyone else. What we're going to is Bolshevism.
Cool. Exactly right. Climate change. We got 10 years that we need to give oversight, policy, and regulations of the world's industry to these.
Okay, diversion. Instead of looking at the real issues of conservation and pollution, they're diverting to this thing that the scientific evidence for is at best spurious.
Yeah.
But even challengeable on the basis of what we know about climatic history. They don't want to talk about that. Most of the evidence would support the thesis that what we look upon as climate change is something like El Nino. It's part of a normal meteorological cycle.
That's right.
You get your eyes on that and you take your eyes off what's really happening.
Yeah.
The destruction of the environment in the third world, the pollution of the oceans.
Yep. Yeah, they call it circulatory. Basically, we all need to just hand over all of our rights and all of the policy and industries to these government leaders.
Can you imagine somebody fighting for their life against a debilitating disease, God forbid cancer or something of that nature, and their physicians telling them, we got to do something about your headache. It's a real, we got to deal with this ingrown toenail.
Well, what about carbon revenue redistribution and discrimination, Jacob? That's one of on their agenda. Carbon revenue, redistribution of wealth, and discrimination.
As I said, there were two kinds of socialists, the Stalin kind and the Hitler kind. It is simply a means to redistribute what we have, not what they have.
Yeah, when I
assure you, Bezos will still be rich.
Oh, yeah. When I read this, my wallet just went a little lighter. I mean, I just felt like my just taxes came off my wallet. Here's the last one. It's very, very odd. Happiness, anger, and anxiety. How can you negotiate from anger to get what you want?
Well, again, this is just Alinskyism. It's simple, rules for radicals.
Yeah.
They make everybody so afraid of being called a racist that they just keep repeating it like Goebbels. Repeat the lie often enough and people will believe it. Yeah. So they'll just, you didn't vote for Donald Trump. You voted for Donald Trump. You're a racist. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Obama shafted the blacks. The average income of a black family in America went down $900 after 2 terms of Obama. It went up by $1,000 in the first 11 months of Trump. Forget the facts. You're a racist.
That's exactly right.
Goebbels, Nazism. National Socialist Workers' Party. That's the Hitler version. There's also the Stalin version.
Yeah.
Rules for radicals. It's Alinskyism. You just keep repeating the lie until people think it's the truth.
Man. And there's
a lot of stupid people out there that don't believe it.
Yeah. Well alive in planet Earth. Well, Jacob, just as a side note, just because it's come up in the news quite a bit, but I think it's a reflection of what you're talking about. The interview with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle with Oprah. I mean, they're just reflecting exactly what society is like. I mean, all this idea, I mean, they got paid a lot of money for it, but this idea of racism, this idea of,
Oprah Winfrey, a woman from humble means, her grandmother was probably a saved Christian, and she winds up with $3 billion because of institutional racism. Wealthiest self-made woman in the United States, possibly the world.
Right.
Not inherited wealth. And, she's talking about institutional racism. Well, it doesn't affect her. It's nonsense. If there was institutional racism, Barack Obama, who was a failed president and unqualified for his job, just the same, he never would have gotten elected.
Yeah.
But it's the woke card. You've got to say that. You've got to play that. And that's all it is.
Yeah.
Her husband, Prince Harry, people in America don't know. Many people in the United Kingdom question if he is the son of Prince Charles and not of that military officer that his mother had the affair with, whom he looks very much like. There's never been a DNA test. Whether or not he's actually a member of the royal family biologically anyway is from the House of Windsor is in itself a question. Merkel was not a grade B, a grade C failed actress from the low side of Hollywood.
Right.
And so she's simply using her marriage to an ex-prince who may have never really been a prince to get the platform and publicity she wants. But look at the hypocrisy. She's saying she wants privacy, but she's doing everything she can to get publicity. It is absolutely hypocritical. Look at her relationship with her own father, who, by the way, is Caucasian.
Yeah.
There was no racism in her family. It was biracial. It's all a big front and a show. It's absolute stupidity. People should just ignore them.
Yeah. It's just like the world, Jacob. I think this is why they gather so much publicity. Is just that it's like the world, the self-obsessed narcissism.
That's all.
Oozes out of it. Jacob, but we got day 51 today of Biden's presidency. He finally gave an address to the American people after all these days, and people were beginning to question whether or not he was ever going to do one. He comes out and he sets up some rules for us, for Americans, and basically scolds them. And it says, if you don't follow the rules, we won't have a 4th of July.
First of all, it was Mr. Trump in the closing months of the administration who pushed through the legislation radically to get vaccines.
Yes. Yeah.
He's taking credit for something he had nothing whatsoever to do with. Although it was a China virus, he said it was a Trump virus. That's what an unprincipled liar he is. But I mean, and half senile on top of it, but that's him. He's taking credit for things he had nothing whatsoever to do with. But then if you notice what he really said, he's basically saying we're going to follow Fauci.
Yeah.
The fact that so many medical scientists and physicians doubt the credibility of Fauci clinically and scientifically, you don't count that.
Right.
Where's the peer review? What else you don't count is the following. A large segment of the public, probably more than 50%, but let's say 50%, do not have confidence in Fauci.
No. Yeah, it's probably more.
Much the same as a patient has to have confidence in their physician. A society has to have confidence in the people who run the NIH or the CDC or things like this, and they don't have confidence in Fauci, nor should they have. He's a political animal more than a scientific one or more than a medical one.
Right.
The third thing Biden says is, then we will tell you what you can and cannot do.
Yep.
Can and not should and should not, can and cannot. Again, it is about the war on democracy.
Yep.
It's about the war on democracy. It is, again, the neo-Nazis. Hitlerian socialism.
Yeah.
We will tell you what you can and cannot do.
So he hasn't held any conferences, any press conference during his presidency. He comes out and he begins to lecture everybody. But this is the same guy that even forgot the name of his advisor.
Yes.
His defense secretary.
As we've been saying all along, our enemies, China, Iran, they see him as a half-senile old crank. And that's just what they wanted in the Oval Office. A half-senile old crank with a whore standing in back of him to succeed him. A woman who slept away to political power. Yeah. So you got basically a hooker who got paid in political favors instead of money. And then you've got this half-senile old crank, a professional corruptocrat. Mm. Again, the Bush dynasty was owned by the Saudi Arabians. Obama was in bed with the Iranians, and Biden, China, or anybody else who does a business deal with his son who got kicked out of the Navy for cocaine.
Yep. No mention of the massive immigration crisis that's going on, Jacob.
Nope. Well, again, they're trying to break Texas. Yep. They cannot stop. They know there's a trend towards the red states and people leaving the blue states to take refuge in red states. And they have to break the power of red states by allowing illegal aliens to come in and a new voting law that will make it easier for people to vote who have no right to vote or even be in the country. Right. That is what they're doing. We have an attack on the Constitution and a war on democracy. Yep. That's what it is. These people like Schumer and so forth and Pelosi, they're enemies of the Constitution. They're de facto enemies of the Constitution. Yeah. Some people would define that as treason.
Yes, absolutely. Now, even Roberta Jacobson, who's Biden's coordinator for the southwestern border of the National Security Council, was saying we didn't have this problem because Trump's policies actually did not allow this to happen. Biden's policies are wide open. Even if one of his council...
Biden wants it to happen.
Yeah.
Well, or Pelosi and Schumer do.
Right. So who's the president now, Jacob? I mean, if if you had your say on it, you see Kamala, you see Pelosi, you see Biden. In your mind, who's running the White House?
Probably the short order cook who makes breakfast. It's Biden again, as I said, he's a rubber stamp.
Yeah,
he's a rubber stamp.
I mean, Harris comes out again and says
he means nothing. Now, look, this has always been true. Reagan was aging. He was not in full control of his mental faculties. He just kept saying, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, in the Iran-Contra scandal when he had to testify.
Yeah.
I don't know, I forget. I remember his wife stood in back of him when he was giving speeches after he said trees cause 85% of pollution. We know that it was Bush Sr. We know that it was the former executives of Bechtel, the construction conglomerate, all the contractors to Saudi Arabia, Schultz and Weinberger and these people who were making the real decisions. It's not peculiar to the Democrats.
Right.
It's just that it's gotten worse under Biden.
Very true. I mean, she boasts about this week again taking calls with foreign leaders regarding the Middle East. I mean, you have.
But this is a woman that's not her background. She doesn't even know anything.
Yeah, you have to say that. Okay, you got Sullivan, you got Blinken, and you got Harris calling the shots in the Middle East. This is scary.
Yeah, all three of them, and certainly Sullivan. No friend of Israel.
Yeah, Jacob, I saw this article and I wanted to ask you a question on this. It says, "Are the good old days coming back?" This is relating to the economy. The good old days coming back. Brace yourself for the most dramatic shift in U.S. history in terms of standard of living, economic survivability, economic progress. After this $1.9 trillion, it's basically a COVID stimulus, but it really has nothing to do with COVID. It's just a liberal wish list. And are the good old days coming back, Jacob, where people had jobs and went on?
Today, I paid my American Express bill and I paid my Visa bill. I have no credit card debt at the moment. None. Zero. I mean, zero. When I was putting my kids through private school, when Moriel was a struggling ministry in its earlier days, not that we have it so easy now, but we really struggled in the early days, and getting my kids through law school, I struggled financially, and I was always battling. Now my children are grown up, and it's usually not so difficult. I paid both of my credit card bills today completely. I used to, 20 years ago or whatever, I used to pay 50% of it. And then by the next month, I want to pay the other half, but then it will go up again. So it just never got better. You know, if you want to put your kids through law school, count the cost. But anyway, or medicine or dentistry, count the cost and pray for a miracle. That's my advice. But be that as it may, suppose today I took those credit cards and I maxed out on them. I took out $50,000 or something like that, okay, on my credit cards. And I gave the money away to make people feel richer. That bill's going to come with interest. Now, you're either going to have to pay it back, or you're going to pay part of it back and pay the rest back with devalued currency. It's called inflation.
Yes.
Already, food prices, commodities, particularly petrol,
oh yeah,
raw materials for construction are all going through the roof under Biden. But there's enough stupid people out there who don't know how to think to believe obvious lies. As we have said, God will give you something for nothing. It's called salvation.
Amen.
If you have a good family, they'll give you something for nothing. Maybe a close friend or brethren in a true church. But don't expect something for nothing from a politician. Politicians are by nature professional liars. If you think they're giving you something, watch what they put in one pocket, because that's only happening to take your eyes off of what they're taking out of the other one. You'll become in bondage to them, enslaved to them. That's what socialism does. Churchill realized that. Margaret Thatcher said the problem with socialism is sooner or later you run out of other people's money.
That's right. That's
I
right.
saw how the welfare state broke down in Britain in the 1970s in the winter of discontent. I saw how these policies come to fruition, what they do. Once more, if it doesn't work, we should get it.
Yeah.
That's what's happening. That's what's being said. Protect the swamp. Protect the swamp. When you saw these Hollywood lefties trying to keep their names in the paper and on TV by attacking Donald Trump like De Niro or this Messing, what they were really saying, only they may have been too stupid to know it, we must protect the swamp. Rachel Maddow or that Don Lemon or that Scarborough, what this, we must protect the swamp. That's all they're saying. That Joy Behar and Whoopi Goldberg, whatever. We must protect the swamp. That's what these people are doing.
Yep.
But so are establishment Republicans.
Yep.
Bush, Romney, Murkowski, Collins. We must protect the swamp.
Yeah. No protest.
That is what they're saying.
Yeah.
The swamp that is going to consume all of us. We must protect the swamp at all costs. Not the Constitution that protects us, not the border, not the real good of the economy. We must protect the swamp that's going to swallow us.
Yeah.
This is people reaping what they have sowed. They're not being judged simply for their sin. I'm telling you, societies are not only judged for their sin. Before that happens, they're judged by their sin.
Oh, yeah.
Just like an alcoholic. He'll be judged for his sin if he doesn't repent. But cirrhosis of the liver is going to knock on his door. He is going to be judged by it, or she. They're judged by their sins before they're judged for it. This has certainly happened to Black America under Obama. Things just got worse. And they're going to get worse now.
Yeah. So I guess you're saying no coming back to the good old days.
Look, I've often said the last days are going to be birth pangs in the initial stages. With maternal contractions, there are interim periods of apparent respite, a false sense that the worst is over. But then they come back again with a double ferocity. That is the pattern. That is why Jesus explained it as birth pangs. Yes, there are interim periods of respite. But it's like in California, the period in between tremors, terremotos.
Yeah.
Okay, you have interim period, but sooner or later that San Andreas Falls is going to do the hula hoop. Everybody knows it.
At some point, it's going to break loose. Jacob, this is the Washington Post. I'm going to read you the headline.
Washington, sorry, Mike. Sorry to correct you. I have to. The Washington Compost.
I like that better. The Washington Compost. They deserve that. Biden is showering money to the people, sharply cutting poverty. This is March 6, 2021. He is the hero of America, sharply cutting poverty. Jacob, this
with borrowed money, with quantitative easing, by taking money out of a cash machine and giving it away on pet projects that have nothing to do with COVID. Yeah, he's the savior until the bill comes in the mail, and the bill will come.
And people believe this stuff. People actually believe that, I'm not showering with money, Jacob. I don't see people being cut out of poverty. I mean, this is a joke. This is a disaster. But again, even Ted Cruz tried to stop the bill from being paid out to illegal residents. It's called the Cruz bill. He was laughed out of the building and it got shut down by Republicans and Democrats.
Of course.
Yeah, they're not interested in any of this. They just want $9 trillion. And of course, it does, like you said,
a lot of that was bailout of pension funds for unions and things like this, things unrelated to COVID.
400 billion to 400
Oh,
million.
you don't do it, you're not helping fight COVID. That's the mentality, what they tell people. That's what the media propagates.
Planned Parenthood.
But that's not what's actually happening.
Yeah. So Planned Parenthood's getting money out of the COVID deal, a lot of money. Americans are getting $1,400 I guess that's what they call showering with money. But the economy, you mentioned the gas prices, 39 cents higher than last year. Agriculture commodities, 50%, lumber prices, 180%. They just keep, people go to the store, Jacob.
Remember, inflation essentially, Marco, as you know, but a lot of people don't realize this. There are supply and demand factors that can drive prices higher and lower in a natural economic environment. But when you're talking about this kind of inflation, prices are not going up again. The value of the money is going down. Yeah, he's showering money on people. Not only is it borrowed money that has to be repaid with interest, not only is the money borrowed that has to be repaid, putting the people in debt, not only that, but it's driving prices up. So what good is the money if you need more of it to buy petrol for your car or to feed your family? But people are stupid enough to believe it. There's enough stupid people who are going to reap the fruit of their own stupidity.
The good old days were not that good to begin with, Jacob, but it's going to be worse.
Yep, it says in Ecclesiastes, do not say that the good old days were good, that the former times are better than these. It's not from wisdom you say this. We're told in Ecclesiastes.
Very good. But Jacob, it's not just the economy that they're trying to destroy, the Democrats and the Republicans. They're also trying to change the election rules forever. The HR1, what they call the HR1, the election going, what they call the act, the People Act, what is it called? Ironically named the People's Act. There it is. The People's Act. This is the People's Act, HR1, basically changing what the states want to do. You're going to require the states to offer online registration, same day registration during federal elections. This is changing completely the way elections have been done, ensuring probably a Democratic win for the next 50 years.
There are two aspects of this. If they really wanted cyber democracy, there would be online debates with Zoom by citizens groups, and we would abolish Congress and the Senate because they become redundant. Now, if you really want to have authentic cyber democracy and throw Toomey and Durbin and Pelosi and Schumer out into the street where they belong, and I'm being kind by saying street, okay, I'm willing to listen to your proposal. Anything that gets rid of them is good for the country. But they don't want cyber democracy. They want to corrupt the cyber technology in order to eliminate democracy. Left-wing parties have always had that strategy. Let me speak about Great Britain. After the Second World War, when the nation was still in ruins, very much because of the Blitz and because of the cost of the war, the welfare state was begun with good intention. Some guy named Sir William Beveridge. But eventually it became something never intended to be, except by the political establishment. Originally, a single-parent family in the late 1940s was a poor woman whose husband was killed in the war against the Nazis or the Japanese. And the philosophy of the day was the taxpayers have to step in and take some of the financial responsibility for these war widows and their children, these war orphans. Okay. You can understand that. But today, a single parent family is a woman in a council flat. A council flat is like a housing project in America with 5 kids from 3 different yobos, and people who work for a living are paying for them. Same as in the States. 3 out of 4 black children born out of wedlock. So many of them on welfare and food stamps. This is what they do. They create a permanent underclass, as we've said, to keep themselves in power. Yeah. What the British Labour Party did was get as many people as possible living in council houses, government-provided housing, so that your housing will depend on them getting reelected. Get as many people as possible dependent on the national health, on socialized medicine. That doesn't really work well, because your health care for you and your family will depend on them getting reelected. socialize industries so that your job will depend on them getting reelected. They did this with the coal mines. It was unbelievable what they did with the coal mining industry in Britain and the railroads. Well, that's what they did in Britain. It's the same thing in America. It's always designed to make an underclass to keep themselves in power. Just like Black Americans have largely been bamboozled, your advancement, your position depends on the Democrats getting reelected.
Yeah.
No, your enslavement, your remaining the low man on the totem pole depends on the Democrats being reelected. But you're going to vote for them, aren't you?
Jacob, you're talking about England, and it sounds so reminiscent of today in America here. But in England, they still have some issues, and the reality is, I did want to tell you Happy Bench Day, because for the first time, Brits are allowed to sit on benches at parks, and everybody's happy about it, as if there's something to be happy about. Well, at the same time, the chief medical officer, Mr. Whitney, comes out and said, well, we project that COVID is going to come back in October, so don't get too happy. We're going to lock you down again. It's just like you talked about the World Economic Forum. They'll use this to control people.
Of course.
And now they got this.
You look at the states that have had the most sensible COVID control policies, like South Dakota. They're doing better than the other states economically and in terms of COVID infection.
Oh, yeah.
Now, of course, it's more sparsely populated, it's less urbanized, but Texas has major urbanized cities, major.
Florida.
Florida, Miami is no small place. Jacksonville is geographically the largest city in the United States.
Yes.
Dallas is no small place. Together with Fort Worth, it's a very big place. Houston is looks like Los Angeles. It's just the mass just keeps going. I mean, look at the realities.
Yeah.
It's political. It is not scientific. It's manipulated. It is not responsive to legitimate public health concerns. Those things are being manipulated. Those things are being used to engineer a political outcome.
You got it. And Jacob, in the UK today, they're debating about a 6 p.m. curfew for men, because
this is the left-wing Green parties and other extreme left parties.
You got it. It was introduced by the Green Party. Unfortunately, tragically, there was a woman who was stabbed in London. Nobody wants to say who did it, but because they believe it was a man, then for all men are actually going to be a part of this. And even
when Muslims stabbed school children in front of the parliament and put bombs around the parliament, or put bombs in rock concerts, or when Muslim pimps, gangs, were found in Rotherham, England, and systematically enslaving white girls in the sex trade, and the Labour Party politicians knew about it and did nothing because they didn't want to offend the Islamic community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or when Muslim physicians tried to blow up Glasgow Airport, or after Lockerbie, when they crashed the plane, hijacked the plane and crashed it into a village in Scotland, or putting the bombs on the buses and the tube trains in London. Did anybody want to ban Muslims?
Not at all.
But because some man rapes a woman who may have been a Muslim, not Muslim man.
That's exactly right.
We have to crack down on men. Male toxicity.
That's exactly right. Mark Drakeford, he's the Welsh Labour Party. I think he's the First Minister of Wales. He says, you know what? We wouldn't rule it out. We wouldn't rule it out because it's a crisis. Women being attacked by men in London. So we need to really get a hold of this. This is
these national parties that you have in England, the Scottish National Party and the Welsh National Party. They are ridiculous jokes. For instance, if I was wanting to drive from the south of Wales, if you're familiar with British geography, from, say, Cardiff or Swansea, to the north of Wales, to, say, Llandudno or that area, I have to drive into England, then drive north, and then drive back again west to get to the north of Wales. I have to go to England like that. I have to make a U, like a C, because there's no highway connecting the north with the south. And they've had a parliament for years, and they never put in a single. They're not there to do what they're elected to do. The Scottish National Party is the same. They have Edinburgh Castle and they have Holyrood Castle, two historic buildings in the history of Scotland. If you were going to have a Scottish parliament for historical reasons and for the sake of being frugal, why didn't you just put the parliament in one of those castles that are national symbols? No, they built a parliament building 10 times over the cost projected, over budget, and it's an ugly eyesore. This is what these parties are. They are ridiculous. They are absolutely ridiculous left-wing parasites run by parasitic morons. That's what they are. They're not about Scottish independence or Welsh independence. They're about lining their own pockets, and they're about fleecing the sheep they're elected to represent.
This is not about protecting women. Like you're right, Jacob. It was about protecting
Of course not.
from the Muslim gangs. I had them in Oxford and Telford and Bristol and Rotterdam.
Of course.
All over, but nobody said anything. Now, or
Nobody.
In 2017, when you had three different attacks, I think it were 3 different attacks over the course of 10 different attacks over the course of 3 weeks, and 34 people died and hundreds were injured in stabbings in London in a period of about 3 weeks. Nobody said anything about this. All of a sudden,
2 British soldiers were murdered on the streets of Greenwich in England.
Yeah.
You've had British soldiers coming back in coffins from Afghanistan and Iraq, and there's a military parade near the air base where they land. It's like what Dover Air Force Base is in United States. There's this equivalent one in Britain. And they have a parade, not a parade, a funeral procession, where they bring the coffins through the streets. You had Muslim protesters spitting on the coffins and jeering and booing. These Muslims who did this should be rounded up and denationalized and sent back to the camel urine countries they came from.
Jacob,
If Britain is so bad, why do you want to live here? If I don't want to live in Morocco. I've been there. If it's so great, what do you want? Why don't you go live there? My family were from this country, from Britain. Yeah. Okay, maybe I have family ties. I'm a little bit different, Anglo-American. But, however, when I came here, I considered it to be a privilege. I considered it to be not a right. I'm not entitled to anything. I've got to come. I've got to respect the laws, the culture, the traditions. That's what I've got to do. Nobody made me come to Britain to go to seminary and things like this. Nobody made me come to Britain. It was my choice, as I believe the Lord led me. All right, it's a bit different because of family and things like that. But I was born in the States. I always lived in New Jersey and New York City. Okay. Then I lived in Israel, but I came to Britain. If you don't like a country, if you don't respect it, if you don't respect its laws and its traditions, you have no right to live in it.
Yeah, you're right, Jacob. Now, you mentioned, Jacob, you're from New York, you're from the East Coast, and you got a big problem. We got a big problem in New York because of the lockdowns, but only that, but they got 2 leaders out there, Dumb and Dumber, otherwise known as Cuomo and de Blasio. They're in big trouble. You spoke about Cuomo a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, when you said, may God deal with his administration and Judge's administration. Well, no sooner than that happened, he gets hit, of course, with sexual allegations, big time sexual allegations, and the fact that they were hiding data about the nursing homes, that he killed over 15,000 seniors there. And now they have impeachment inquiry into Cuomo by the same New York Assembly. The legislature is basically inquiring for impeachment, and AOC and Nadler are turning on him. Is he done, Jacob? Is Cuomo pretty much stick a fork in him?
I hope so, but I would hope that AOC is done. I would hope that Nadler was done. I would hope that de Blasio was done. Unless you change the mentality of the people in New York, that state is done.
Wow. Yeah. De Blasio, of course, is under fire because how he handled the virus, but also the pandemic, of course, but also
Look, I did not always agree with the other Italian American. Rudy Giuliani.
Giuliani, yeah.
He was over friendly to the homosexual activism and things like this. I didn't always agree with him. But on the whole, he was a competent mayor. He was also Italian, Italian American, but he was a competent mayor.
Yeah.
When you have Italian Americans who are competent, why do you vote for somebody like de Blasio? You know, his claim to fame is that he's married to a black woman.
Yeah.
You know?
And you know, he's.
And I don't mean, you know, I don't mean an intelligent black woman. You know, I don't. He's not married to a Candace Owen. He's married to a left-wing bimbo.
Yeah. You know, he's very, very big Sandinista guy. He's a big Sandinista guy. He's a very communist guy. He's just unbelievable. But the crime, Jacob, the crime in New York City is unreal.
If that's what you voted for, that's what you got.
Yeah. Another guy that's or actually not a guy in this case, it's Whitmer in Michigan. Same thing with the allegations of covering data and stuff like that. Now there's an inquiry.
That woman ought to be indicted. I agree.
Yeah, there's a subpoena against her, but also
certainly impeached, not indicted.
Yeah,
Gretchen is a wicked woman.
Yeah, there's a big nursing home scandal because of that. Well, you got Gavin Newsom here in my home state, California, who's bad news. He's not only doubling down on shutting the economy, but there's over 2 million signatures. Have him recall. I mean, are we going to see, Jacob, some of this? Maybe the pendulum will swing the other way now. When you got these
last time it swung the other way, they got rid of Gray Davis and elected the Terminator. What's the
Well, you know, another guy that's
California is a mental institution.
Yeah, a lot of nuts.
Look, I like California, but it's a mental institution. It's not a state, it's a mental institution.
Well said. Now Schumer, I think he's from your home state, Jacob. Not that you want to take any credit for that, but Schumer says no more prayers, just pass the bill. No more prayers, just pass the bill. They don't want to pray about it. They don't, you know, somebody was talking about like, let's just pray about this or pray about the victims of the gun violence and all this stuff. No more prayers, just pass the bill. HR 8, they want to confiscate guns.
You know, if you're not a God-fearing Christian, you cannot be a good American. And if you're not a God-fearing Jew, you cannot be a good American. He has no respect for the Torah or the God of his fathers. None.
Yeah. It's quite an amazing thing that's happening, Jacob, there. So, Jacob, let's move to the wars, rumors of wars. We wind down. You got Biden flying B-52s over the Middle East. Is that a show of strength to Iran? Is that a ploy?
It's posturing. But I don't think his line is going to be seen as hard a line as Trump had. As we speak, with the assistance of Russia and Putin, a new third generation of centrifuge technology for uranium enrichment have become operational in Iran. They're moving ahead, full steam ahead, and he wants to essentially negotiate to help them do it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, there's a U.S. base, Jacob. This happened last night in Syria, in Deir ez-Zor.
Yes.
Being attacked heavily, rockets and heavy missiles by Iranian-backed militias. At least they think they were militia backed by Iran. I have no doubt. But this is just coming through last night. Military bases under siege.
Iran is on back of it, yes.
Yes. Now, you got Biden flying B-52s. You got Iranian militia fighting U.S. bases. You got Ukraine in next to Russia, the two provinces next to Russia that want to be more Russia favoring. NATO is building up a force there on the border of Ukraine with Russia. We got multiple wars, Jacob. We got multiple things happening. This is a Biden.
The Democrats always say peace, peace, and they get you into war. That goes back to Roosevelt.
Yeah.
It goes back to Truman in Korea. They always say peace, peace, but they get you into war.
Yeah. Is Biden pushing Putin in this case, Jacob? Because he wants to appease Iran, but he wants to go after Russia. Is this whole Democratic thing with Hillary Clinton blaming Trump about being a Russian spy and all those things? Is Russia really the target?
all of that stuff interrelates, but ultimately it is about the powers that will control Europe.
Mm. Mm.
A real factor in it is the export of Russian natural gas into Western Europe.
Mm.
And the United States and Israel and Greece and Cyprus want to replace Russia as the source of natural gas. You have these super tankers now delivering natural gas from the United States directly into European ports.
Yep.
When you have the development of the Leviathan field, Russia is going to be outpaced. This is essentially what's happening. However, there's another factor. One of the things that destroyed the Soviet Union was they were forced to invest in the military. The United States got even with Russia and the Soviet Union for Vietnam. They got even when the Soviets supported the North Vietnamese against the Americans supported the Mujahideen against the Russians. They got even with the Russians. They did the same thing in Nicaragua, didn't they?
They did.
With the 70s, they got even with the Cubans and all this stuff. That's what they did. Okay, so they got even. But they forced Russia to invest in its military. This was Star Wars. We can bankrupt you. And what it is going to do, it is going to bring more and more economic pressure on Putin. Unfortunately, oil prices are being driven up by Biden, which will help Putin. So you need some way to ameliorate or modify the impact of that. You force Russia to overinvest in its military at the expense of the rest of the economy. That's how you bring Russia down. That's how they were defeated. The other way is that they undermined the market value of Russian mineral and natural resource exports. You undermine the prices. And the United States did that with Saudi Arabia. They bankrupted the Soviet Union.
Jacob, does Putin see NATO as basically Europe? Is that how they see it? Europe is encroaching.
They see NATO as a vestige of the Cold War. Don't forget, the Iron Curtain, as I've said, was built by Stalin, but Truman gave him the iron.
Now, Jacob, you got a massive cyber attack hit Russia a couple of days ago.
In Russia.
Russia announced their websites, the Kremlin.ru and other Russian government websites all went down. They announced it. They're of course, they don't know if it's the U.S. They don't know if it was Europe, but President Vladimir Putin, or in this case, the president and Vladimir Putin are all configuring. They're trying to figure out that, who created this problem, who's, what issues they're going to have. But they also met in a Security Council. This Security Council included issues regarding the attack, issues regarding the de-dollarization of their economy, and of course, the launching of the digital ruble. Is Russia ready to move, Jacob, in the Middle East and bipartisan? They're gonna do it without the I guess the blessings of the West. They're gonna move into the Middle East and become their own private economy.
Well, there are two issues here. The first issue is the hacking into the computer systems in Russia. And the same thing happens in China. They don't tell you that.
Right.
There is a tit-for-tat war where the NSA and the British GCHQ do this to the countries that attempt to do it to Western countries and to the United States. We can do it too. We can do it better. The colossal example was the Stux virus, at least the most publicly known one, was the Stux virus, where it was the American NSA working with the Israelis, possibly GCHQ, that basically shut down the internet in Iran. Yeah. It's a high stakes game, but it is a synergistic game. In other words, you have to look at what's happening in the cyber war with what is happening in the Ukraine and with what is happening in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Many people can see a Gog and Magog scenario taking place. We've talked about that many times.
Yeah.
Depending if you believe there's one or two Gog and Magogs. The one at the end of the millennium and one, or there's another one before it that prefigures it. In any event, Russia sees the Middle East as vital to its own oil prices and its own natural gas exports. It desperately needs foreign exchange. Always does. Now, as far as the cyber ruble,
Yeah.
the Fed is talking about cyber dollars.
Right.
We've already, in de facto terms, had it. You know, we think of the M1, the money in circulation, and the M2.
Yeah.
When you go down further, like you're basically dealing with electronic cash transfers.
Yeah.
It is already something of a reality and has been for some time. They're just going to try to bring it up the M ladder.
Yes.
So,
Correct.
if you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that has always been an issue is replacing the dollar as the basis of world currency reserves. China has not been able to do that because it would cause the prices of Chinese exports to go up to more realistic levels. That's why the yuan has not been a contender. Okay. The euro, Europe has become too divided and weakened, particularly post-Brexit. The euro has not been a contender, and that looked like the best prospect. Okay. So certainly the British pound, although relatively stable, has had its day. It's not going to be a contender, or the Swiss franc or any of those things. You're basically, and not the yen. Japan has had its day. It's not going to disappear, but it has apexed. China is now the predominant economy in Asia. Japan is playing second fiddle. Okay. It's not going to be the yen. It's not going to be the euro, at least not in the short term. It's certainly not going to be the RMB of China. Well, what can replace the dollar? At present, nothing can.
No.
Unless you move to blockchains, unless you move to blockchain currency. This is the only way it can be done. Now, understand the value of having your currency as the basis of world. This goes back to Bretton Woods in the aftermath of the Second World War.
Yes.
When you have your currency as the basis to world reserves and most commodities and international trade is denominated in your money, you can, in a sense, write checks that you don't have to cash. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can write checks that you don't have to cash. The United States would not be in the position it has been had the dollar not replaced the British pound as the basis of world currency reserves. But in 1968, something happened. Nixon defaulted on the dollar, went off the gold standard. And since then, everyone's been walking on eggs. Well, how long can you walk on eggs before the eggs begin to crack?
Yeah. And I think some of these countries know that it's about to crack, so they have to make a move.
Well, because of the deficits in America, not that their deficits are any lower, some of them are worse, but because of the international deficits, let's say, and because of the policies of Biden, that's going to be quantitative easing. They're just printing money and giving it away for things that are not going to have any long-term benefit.
Yeah. Jacob.
Or at least very little. They know something has to give sooner or later.
Yep.
Do I think another currency is going to replace the dollar? Personally, no, I've never thought that. If anyone would have, it would have been the euro, but that's not happened. If any currency replaces the dollar, it will not be a national currency, but a digital currency with a fixed value by international agreement. As I've always said, I remember like 20 years ago, I said, all you would need, and I've said this several times, even on our catching up, or at least I've said it a few times. All you would need is a de facto exchange rate mechanism between the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank and the European Central Bank. All you'd need is a one-for-one exchange rate where they would have to adjust their interest rates to keep it fixed, to keep the exchange rate fixed. Once $1 equals €1, the Swiss franc, the pound, the yen, the yuan, the ruble, everything else is going to have to fall into place. Now, the Russian rupee is a joke. It's a joke. It's worth about 2 cents. It's worth less than 2 cents.
Wow.
It's worth less than 2 US cents.
A lot of problems in Russia, Jacob, and I guess even a basket of
Not
currency.
only that, but like Japan, it has an aging population.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I remember when I went to Russia, when the Iron Curtain came down. 10 miles, 12 miles outside of Leningrad, St. Petersburg, and 10, 12 miles outside of Moscow. No more than that. It looked like the third world.
Wow. Wow. Poverty. Yeah, incredible. Jacob, we got another thing, and this is related to what happened in Russia. You got the largest data center in France basically burned down. This is cyber data of Europe. This is internet data of Europe. Hosting services are all based in Strasbourg, France. And the whole thing came down. All the buildings got burnt down, except for a few. But it's just, again, you talk about tit for tat. Is this, you think it's as a response? I mean, you got cyber data being taken, being destroyed, being attacked. Is this a new?
I would not rule out the possibility of it being some kind of act of sabotage or arson. I could not rule that out. I'm not saying it was. I have no evidence it was, but I certainly wouldn't rule it out. However, much the same as businesses have mirror sites,
Yeah.
so too these mega complexes are mirrored.
Yeah.
Another one will kick in to replace it.
Yeah.
It's
Interesting.
Yeah.
Biden's supposed to sign an executive order to strengthen the government's network to crack down on cyber conflict. It seems like people have this on their mind. This is something that is going to be the new type of warfare. And it's no coincidence.
People don't realize the budget of the NSA in Fort Meade, Maryland, and that other place they have in Colorado, and its British equivalent partner in Cheltenham, England, Cheltenham Spa, and the other one near Alice Springs, Australia. There's several of them around the world. There's one in Cyprus, the branches of it, but it's an Anglo-American network. Canadians are involved. It's basically the English-speaking democracies. NATO is not the essence of American military alliances. It is electronic intelligence. It is satellite intelligence. It is GCHQ in England. It is the NSA in Fort Meade, Maryland. That is where the English-speaking nations, Australia, Canada, Britain, America, work as a integrated, almost monolithic unit. That is more important than NATO.
Very interesting, Jacob. Jacob, let's finish off with the Middle East. You got a country that's very connected to Russia, which is Iran, and their ship just got attacked near Syria, and they're blaming Israel. They just signed a cooperative treatment with treaty with Russia for 5 years. They're also seemingly involved in eco-terrorism off the coast of Israel with the oil spill.
The Iranians have engaged in eco-terrorism against Israel. They are also, of course, stepping up their upgrades of weapon systems to the Houthis in Yemen to threaten Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, they
at the same time.
Yeah, the Saudis.
But yes, Israel has at least 12 times attacked Iranian ships surreptitiously that were delivering weapons either to Hezbollah in Lebanon or to Syria. Okay, the latest was not far off the coast of Galilee. That happened a few days ago,
right,
and it was in direct retaliation to the one against an Israeli ship last week.
That's right.
Very much a tit for tat.
Right. Yeah. that eco-terrorism is really interesting because after 2 weeks, they found out that it was the Iranians who were doing it. Not that
Yes.
we didn't know before, but
Well, that was suspected from day one anyhow.
absolutely. Now, Biden sees all this and he wants to have an emergency meeting with Israel on Iran issues. Now, get this, Jacob. Who's leading the meeting? Jake Sullivan, Anthony Blinken, Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
No
You
Biden.
have one prostitute who knows nothing. You have Blinken, stinking Blinken, and then you have Sullivan, who's essentially an opponent of Israel. They're not there to negotiate. They are not there to confer. They are there to try to bully and dictate.
Oh, yeah. So this is what we have to look forward
And to placate Iran.
Placate Iran, bully Israel. That's the name of the game for the
That was the policy. Remember, it's not the Biden administration. It's the old Biden administration. It's Obama too.
Yeah, I oftentimes forget that it's really, I think, Obama's calling all the shots at this point. Jacob, in Israel,
It may very well be that Obama is calling a lot of the shots as to what the Biden administration does.
yeah, very true. Now, Jacob, in Israel, you got the cases of the virus going way down. You got Pfizer coming out and saying we chose Israel as a place to test our vaccine. And you have an election coming up in a couple of weeks. Lots of stuff going on in Israel. Is Netanyahu in trouble in the polls? Is his handling of the COVID and dealing with Pfizer going to hurt him?
Okay, everybody is in trouble in the polls. And it's become even more complicated than usual because of what is happening with the religious parties and the decision of the Israeli Supreme Court, who are demanding a law that would allow the ultra-Orthodox to retain control over conversion to Judaism, even outside of Israel. We won't recognize your aliyah or your immigration unless you had an Orthodox conversion, things like that. They're trying to extend their power of their Sanhedrin to New York and things like this. This is what they're trying to do. Okay. So you can't make a coalition without the religious parties, the national religious parties, and with Shas and these other parties. Okay. So what is always a problem has now become monumental. Or if it always was monumental, now it's become the Colossus of Rhodes or the Statue of Liberty. It's just unbelievable problem. Yes, he's in trouble, but so is everyone else. That's the only equalizer on the playing field, is that they're all in trouble. Now, concerning COVID, very often American companies use Israel for a couple of things. One is high-tech development. A lot of American companies outsource research and development to Israeli companies that have been bought by American companies. You'll see them in Herzliya, north of Tel Aviv, along the beach. These companies are Israeli companies, but they're owned by Silicon Valley or Seattle, okay? And a lot of American companies use Israel as an R&D base, okay, for various reasons. Secondly, of course, is defense cooperation, but that's always gone on. But the third is test marketing. Israel is like Holland. Almost everybody speaks English. Almost everybody speaks English. Certainly any educated person in Israel speaks English. You can't go to university in Israel unless you speak English. You can't be an officer in the military unless you speak English, and so forth. Okay. So you've got an almost English-speaking country, similar to Holland or Quebec in France. Secondly, it has a developed infrastructure. So it has an infrastructure that's compatible with other developed countries in terms of a market.
Yeah.
Third, demographically, it's a relatively low population.
Right.
It's easier to sample. It's easier to statistically analyze. You put those factors together, Israel is a perfect place for test marketing a lot of things. Through the Kupat Olim system, the national health system of Israel, their version of Obamacare, it is very easy to maintain a central body of statistics and to analyze them as to what is happening. Partially for legitimate reasons of fear of what could happen medically to the population, and partially due to political considerations. COVID vaccines were developed very quickly, but were not properly
Not at all.
tested by the FDA the way medications normally are.
Right.
That takes time. That takes a lot of time. They needed somewhere where they could do it really quick and really fast. We need to get data that would take 5 years. We need it in 5 months.
Right.
And they picked Israel to do it because the political situation in Israel lent itself to it. Another factor is in the Orthodox communities among the Hasidic and ultra-Orthodox Jews in Bnei Brak, in Meah Shearim, places like this, you have a very high population density. You have a high population density as opposed to kibbutzes and moshavs and things like this, where the population is more diffuse in the rural areas and even in urban areas. In the ultra-Orthodox areas, it is a highly concentrated population density. So you're getting rural population, you're getting urban and suburban population, and you're getting high density urban population.
Yeah.
You're seeing how the virus works in all major sectors. There's not many places in the world you can do that within such a small geographical area. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to do that within a small geographical area, but Israel is one place where you can.
Yeah. Apparently that was a big thing for Pfizer to work with the Israeli government to get all this data. I guess what bothers me is it was a test. You know, it's like,
oh yes,
trial of vaccines. It's like, what are you testing on me for? You know, that kind of
yes.
thing. Jacob, but the other thing that's happening in Israel, Jacob, is it's the Saudis. Saudis are very, very concerned for the people. You had an incident where the crown prince of Jordan, Mr. Hussein, was not allowed to go to the Temple Mount because of a disagreement over security arrangements. But then the Saudis stepped in, and then they want to control it. What's going on with the Temple Mount? We're talking some biblical prophecy.
King Abdullah's son, crown prince, was making a scheduled trip to Israel, entering Israel across the Allenby Bridge, across the Jordan, and then driving via Jericho to Jerusalem. Because it was a state visit, howbeit of a religious nature, not a political nature officially, although it would have had political ramifications, it was agreed he could come with bodyguards and a certain amount of protective weapons and armament and things like this,
right,
that the Israelis would allow. The number of bodyguards and the amount of armament that he showed up with at the Allenby Bridge to enter the West Bank was above what was agreed. The Israelis would not allow entrance. There is a rumor in Israel that it was the political opponents of Benjamin Netanyahu that provoked the incident because they wanted it to blow up in his face politically. He was flying to the Emirates.
Yeah.
And it was rumored he was going to meet with Mohammed bin Salman.
Right.
Okay. That he was going to meet with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, the de facto main ruler of Saudi Arabia. It was rumored. But Jordan would not allow overflight. You'd have to go from Ben Gurion Airport, basically, fly east, and then south via over Aqaba into Saudi Arabian airspace, and then to the Persian Gulf. There was, however, an alternative route. You could have flown directly south over the Negev via Eilat.
Okay.
Eilat, and then entered Saudi airspace. That would bypassing Jordan, and the Egyptians would have, if you went along the Sinai, the Egyptians, Sisi would have allowed it most certainly. So there was an alternative route. That tells me that there's something going on of a political nature that is being, again, orchestrated for political intentions.
Yeah.
However, at the same time, however, the wife of Benjamin Netanyahu took ill, physically ill. I think she's hospitalized.
Okay.
So that was the official reason he gave as to why the trip has been postponed.
Got it.
But let's put that to one side. What's really important are some statements that have come out of Saudi Arabia. We have seen, in the face of the Iranian threat and the threat from the Houthis, who are being or they've become the surrogates of the Iranians. The Houthis, okay.
Totally backed by them.
Yeah, the marionettes, that the Saudi government is giving less influence to the Wahhab, not the Wahhab Islam, Sunni conservatism, which that's Wahhabism, but specifically to the Salafists, to the ultra Sharia clergy.
Wow.
Okay. Their power has not diminished, but receded to a level not seen since 1991. In 1991, the power of the Salafists and their religious police, the Mutawa, were sequestered by the Saudi government when they needed the Americans to come in with the British and liberate Kuwait. The Saudis were afraid of Saddam Hussein, and they had to do something. So hundreds of thousands of Western troops came into Saudi Arabia, much to the aggravation of what became Al Qaeda. That was one of the things that got bin Laden really angry, that American troops were coming into Saudi Arabia. So this happened, and at that time, the Saudi government, before the present crown prince, before bin Salman, ordered the Mutawa out of eastern Saudi Arabia and away from all American bases and things like this. And they were really angry. And once Kuwait was liberated, they came back with a vengeance. They came back fearsome, and they didn't want to lose power again. But now it's happening. They're losing power again because of the fear of Iran. The House of Saud, the dynasty, which is the government of Saudi Arabia in effect, and they bear responsibility for September 11th to a colossal degree. They are about self-preservation. They use money, petro wealth, to buy off the Salafist clergy. But now they're playing a different game. We can't trust Biden. We need an ally against Iran who hates Iran as much as we do. That's Israel.
Yep.
Again, he's trying to develop a competitive city to what has happened in Dubai, which is on the Gulf.
Right.
On the Red Sea, he's building Neom up on the Gulf of Aqaba, where Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt come together, and close to the high-tech hub of the Middle East, which is Israel. Israel is the high-tech hub.
Right.
These Arab countries, they buy stuff from Europe and America and Europe. They don't have what Israel has. Okay. Israel has it. It may be owned by Americans, but it's Israeli. They just don't have that. Very little. So they've begun to tip the scale to the aggravation of ultra-conservative Salafists, certainly, but to the Palestinian Arabs, and are making statements that are concessionary concerning the Temple Mount, concerning the Mosque of Aqsa and the Mosque of Omar, better known as the Dome of the Rock. For political purposes, largely in the propaganda war after 1967, Islamic scholars and propagandists and governments began echoing this idea that the Temple Mount and Jerusalem, Al-Quds, it's called in Arabic, Al-Quds,
Yeah.
is the third holiest site in Islam. It's from here Muhammad went up to heaven. That's what they believe. Okay. And it's the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. After Mecca and Medina, it's our third holy city. That only became widely propagated after the 1967 Six-Day War.
Very interesting.
It was never a major teaching of Islam before that. In fact, Al-Quds is only mentioned 3 times in the Quran, and there was even a debate among scholars if it was Jerusalem.
So Jerusalem's not named in the Quran at all.
No. So now the Saudi Arabian government is beginning to downplay claims to the importance or the Al-Aqsa Mosque being essential to Islam in the sense that the tomb of the Prophet is in Medina, what they call the Prophet, or the Kaaba in Mecca. They're beginning to downplay it, again, to accommodate Israel. Now, the potential ramification of this is it makes another step towards the possibility of a reconstruction of a third temple, of the Millennial Temple.
That's where I was trying to get at. Yeah.
Okay. It makes the possibility more possible. This is happening at the same time where, in a concession for political support in an election year, some of the ultra-Orthodox parties want to have Paschal sacrifices on the Temple Mount.
Yes, absolutely. Some of the prominent rabbis asking Netanyahu.
Yes, we are definitely seeing 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 9 beginning to take shape in some way. How long it'll be, I don't know, but what's happening now would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. It would have been unthinkable 10 years ago, or less than 10 years ago.
Wow.
But now it's beginning to at least cast the shadow of that happening. Now, this is a whole other subject in itself. We've talked about the theories of Dr. Dan Bahat and Dr. Asher Kaufman as to the temple's exact location. These are other factors. I don't want to digress into them now.
Right.
But what you see happening with the Saudi Arabian government this week is very, very notable.
Jacob, where do you see Erdogan in this? Because he's the one that wants to liberate the Temple Mount from Israel.
Yep.
Is he going to play a role in this?
Well, again, if those who believe that there are 2 battles of Gog and Magog, not just the one at the end of the millennial reign, but another one, and they have good arguments, they have reasons to believe that because of the cleaning up the battlefield debris for 7 months and things like this.
Yeah.
Okay, that if that is the case, the role that would be played by Turkey in league with Iran and with Russia is obvious. But except for Libya, called Put, and at that time it was not an Arab country. In Ezekiel's day, it was not even an Arab country. Except, and again today, there's a lot of Berbers who live there. Who are not Arabs. Indigenous people are Berber. Be that as it may, it would explain why you don't see Arab countries in the constellation of nations aligned against Israel in Ezekiel 38 and 39. It would explain a lot.
Yeah, they're on the sidelines, basically on the sidelines. Jacob, there's a controversy about this oil pipeline that was secretly meaning that it wasn't promoted as much. It was built with Iran and Israel back in the 60s, and now it's still in play. But with the UAE and the deal with Mr. Trump, the Abraham Accord, this pipeline is going to be a major factor of oil being transferred from one area of the Middle East to the other area, from basically taking away business from the Suez Canal and transportation of oil from the Suez Canal to Israel. Israel's going to be a major player in the oil industry in the Middle East. This is again Europe Asia pipeline. This is their CEO saying it opens a lot of doors for opportunities for Israel to be basically the region's energy trader. You want energy, you come to Israel.
Okay. There are multiple aspects of this scenario, multiple. Let's go back to the beginning in the 1960s before the Shah fell, before Pahlavi fell.
Yeah.
Israel got nearly all of its oil from Iran, at that time friendly to Israel, by tankers that came to Eilat through the Gulf of Aqaba.
That's right.
When the Egyptians under Nasser put a naval blockade at the Sharm el-Sheikh at the entrance to the Gulf of Aqaba from the Red Sea, that is what provoked the 67 war. Israel became energy starved if it didn't fight. Okay. Nasser ordered the UN peacekeeping forces out of the Eastern Sinai, which had been there since the previous 56 war, essentially, and he put up a military blockade near Sharm el-Sheikh, a naval blockade. In order to circumvent marine vulnerability in the transport of oil, this pipeline was undertaken in cooperation with Iran and Israel. But the problem then was, of course, the Arab states.
Yes.
Now that is much less of a problem.
Correct.
So it becomes negotiable.
Yeah.
Secondly, it relates also to Neon. Again, the Saudi Arabians want an alternative. They do not want to be outperformed by the Emirates due to Dubai and to a lesser degree, Muscat and Abu Dhabi, but particularly Dubai. They want to have their own super city that would be like a country within a country. Okay. The oil would have to, the pipeline would go through that area, right through the air.
Correct.
That is another factor. Third, the general fear of Iran and the not wanting to have reliance on Persian Gulf ports or oil that has to go through the Straits of Hormuz.
That's right.
How do we make our oil marketable by avoiding the Persian Gulf and the Straits of Hormuz, where there'd be a vulnerability to Iranian closure of the straits or even attack on tankers and so forth and on port facilities, on tanker port facilities. And there's already been attacks in Saudi Arabia from both Yemen and Iran.
Yeah, that's right.
In Saudi Arabia. That's another factor. A fourth factor is the Suez Canal was like the Panama Canal. It was a architectural and engineering wonder for the time it was built. But you've got these super tankers that cannot easily be navigated through the Suez Canal. And a lot of the traffic in the Suez Canal is one way. It's like a single rail line where the traffic has to run both ways. One train has to wait till the other one comes. It's not the best. So these super tankers have to circumnavigate the Horn of Africa. After the 1967 war, until Kissinger negotiated the reopening of the canal in the aftermath of the Yom Kippur War in 73, these super tankers were built to transport oil to Europe, circumventing or bypassing the Suez Canal because it was closed. So you had to go all the way around Africa, and with these huge, huge tankers, unbelievable size. They were like American aircraft carriers, that kind of thing. Something on that scale. Well, these tankers exist, okay, but they're expensive, and it's a long way to sail. If you can have a pipeline, now you're talking about something different.
Yep.
And if that pipeline can be integrated into the Leviathan fuel pipeline network,
I was just going to
going from Galilee into Greece to European markets via Cyprus, you've got something. that would irk Russia, that would irk Iran,
Yeah.
that would irk Turkey,
Yeah.
that would irk a lot of people.
Yeah.
So that is the comprehensive picture of what you're talking about.
Very interesting, Jacob, because we got news yesterday that Saudis were flying F-15s into Crete to protect something. To protect something. We don't know what they were protecting, but the reality.
We're seeing more and more cooperation between Greece, Greek Cypriots,
Yep.
Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the Emirates, and it's all based on common interest and fear of Iran.
Yeah, I do think, Jacob, that the Jewish state is going to play a major role in trade, petroleum.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and which is going to make them, of course, the jewel that maybe if there's a Magog invasion before the millennium, that's going to be a major source of envy. Jacob, one final thing, and I'll leave you with this. The Pope went to Iraq recently, and basically show that ecumenical unity is still possible with Islam, and it says we need to do it. Christians need to do it, and it's going to come out of Iraq. The ecumenical movement, he says, wants to come out of Iraq. These agreements, because this is where the war has happened. We need to make peace with Muslims here. There is a prophecy in Zechariah about a woman in a basket. You did a wonderful teaching about the woman in the basket with the storks and being flown they flew this woman in a basket to Shinar, which is Iraq.
Shinar.
Yeah. Are we seeing something like this? Is
It
ecumenical?
obviously relates to that. Also the prophecy in Revelation, every unclean bird was the stalks from not a kosher bird, and taking the woman to false religion and seduction. I've been saying for some time, I've said this before, that Islam and Roman Catholicism see Mary as a convergent figure between the Islamic world and the Roman Catholic world. What is the most common name in most Arab countries for a girl?
Fatima.
Absolutely. Now, the Christian populations, and including Catholics, the Syrian Christians, they've been decimated in Iraq.
Yeah.
Decimated. Absolutely decimated. But we know these things always have a political side, not just a religious side. And we know that prophecy will be fulfilled. It's interesting, though, that although you have, with the Abraham Accords, the Interfaith Worship Center in Abu Dhabi, the Pope didn't go to Abu Dhabi.
No, he didn't.
He went to where Babylon was located.
Yeah.
He went to Iraq. Now, that's noteworthy. That's very interesting.
Yeah. Jacob, so much is happening, and we need to we're going to stop our catching up with Jacob here. But so many things are happening. The Pope, of course, with the ecumenical unity out of Iraq, Shinar. We got Saudi Arabia collaborating with Israel to the degree that they're okay with the Temple Mount. If they do get control of it, they don't see it as an important thing. You got wars. You got, of course, the debacle in the West with the economy and the wars coming up in the Middle East. It's just one thing after another. People are left desperate to find out what's going on.
Yeah, but what I should have mentioned, I'm sorry, Margot, the B-52 overflights of the two B-52s, they think there was two B-52 bombers. They were escorted by the Israeli Air Force.
Oh.
Then they were escorted by the Saudi Air Force.
Oh.
So you already have an operational cooperation involving United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, and a joint exercise, obviously staged to, in some way, posture against Iran.
Yeah, it's leverage.
So you already have the cooperation taking place, and it is no ingenious deduction to say that Mossad is cooperating with Saudi intelligence.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The fact they're even involved in a religious aspect, Jacob, about the temple, and the rabbis are asking for a Passover sacrifice if it could be done this year, and you got an election coming up in Israel in a couple of weeks. All these are setting the stage up, Jacob. I think 2021 is going to be quite different than 2020, And we're going to look back at it if the Lord gives us that grace to say, wow, what a 2021 it was. Jacob, final words for our subscribers and viewers as they see all these things happening. What shall we do?
Lift up your head and rejoice, for our redemption draws near. Moriel greatly appreciates your prayers and support, but above all, we want people to keep their eyes on Jesus. When you look down at the newspaper, look up, because he is coming soon. Keep us in prayer. May God bless you and your family. Thank you so much.
Jacob, it's always a pleasure, and thank you for staying up with us. I know it's late in the UK, but you always make an effort to make sure that all of God's kids get the proper news and put their eyes on Jesus. Thank you so much for that.
For more information about Moriel, check out our website, www.moriel.org.